Bill Bonnier is a chief engineer of feature sound at Sony. He's worked with the engineering team for 24 years, and he started his engineering career working as a technician in London in 1976 and was a crew that launched the post facilities at Skywalker in '87. Bill? And Kevin Collier began his profession at Quad 8, and he eventually supervised the custom console division. He designed custom music and production consoles, and then he started working at Universal in the Hitchcock Theater for 11 years, and since '95, he's been the director of engineering at Warner Brothers, responsible for everything technical there. David Gray here, Vice President, Global Service and Industry Relations at Dolby. He joined in 1980. In previous, he had spent 10 years building custom electronics and doing electronics repairs for such artists as Kinks, Orleans, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Steely Dan, and Frank Zappa. David has been a part of 2 scientific and engineering awards from the Academy, and as an old friend. John Kellogg, Senior Director of Corporate Strategy at DTS. His focus on new advanced audio platforms, spatial techniques for rendering audio, and standards for all ecosystems. And John had been Director of Corporate Strategy for SRS, which he joined to develop the MDA format we'll be talking about. John previously was with Dolby Labs. Wilfred von Balen, founder and CEO of Auro Technologies, pioneered high-end surround sound for both music and film, invented the Auro-3D listening formats and the Auro Creative Suites for various techniques with plugins, so on and forth. He graduated from Royal Conservatory in Antwerp, built his first music studio at 18, and has many gold records to his name. In 1995, he built Galaxy Studios. So that is our panel here. So gentlemen, let's start this by going, let's go back to the future in some ways. How, if we jump 5 years, and no, I'm going to X out later. First, I want to have you guys talk, actually. Wilfred, why don't you start? Just give an overview of your format, and then the 3 gentlemen from 3 formats will talk, and then we'll open up broader. So, Wilfred?
Yeah, okay. In fact, it started in 2005, so about 9 years ago, when I was for the first time hearing a classical recording from a guy who said, yeah, 5.1 for music recording is a little bit difficult. What can I do with the LFE channel? And the center is a little bit difficult as well. So we was putting just these 2 speakers up. And I was surprised when I heard that, how much more transparency, how much more harmonics, how much more depth there was coming from the front. And there were only like classical recordings with it, so I was asked for doing a pop recording with that format. And when I started, I wanted to make, of course, backwards compatibility with 5.1. And so I put the 7.1 system up with, let's say, 5.1 on the bottom with 2 speakers up. And it was exciting to, let's say, to work with that height in the front and what we could do from a creative point of view, but especially from a sonic point of view. It was sounding so much natural in a certain way, but in a certain way not, because, let's say, there was a very unnatural balance. There were only like 2 channels in the back and 5 in the front, and that was not really right. So when I put it then 2 speakers up, back, that was the first time I had a new magical moment in my life. I was for the first time surrounded by music like I was never before, and that was really the first time I found this is really immersive sound. And then, the question was, okay, 10 channels, how are you going to bring that into the market? And I started it first as well in small rooms. And the question was, how can we make this now scalable to bigger rooms? That was one of the things what I've seen as well when I was busy with 5.1. The backwards compatibility and the scalability is one of the most important things to bring a new format in the market, and perhaps not only for cinema, but as well for music and for games and everything. So that was, in fact, let's say, the beginning of the whole approach, as well as the beginning of the let's say, the technical inventions related to it, which I, in fact, then in 2010 launched for the first time at an AES Spatial convention. And the question was how we are going to call this new format, because I was talking already years for, in the beginning I said it's a true 3-dimensional sound system, and then people said, yeah, but I have that already at home. So a lot of said, ooh, yeah, 5.1 is 3D sound, yeah. And there was a lot of misunderstanding by not having height. Let's say we didn't have the 3rd dimension, yeah. So when I called it a true 3-dimensional sound system, it was making so much confusion. So the question was how are we going to call it then? And then I know in the beginning we called it surround sound with height. But that's, of course, a very difficult term, let's say, to come up with, let's say, as a general term, yeah. And then in 2010, when I launched it, then I called it immersive sound. So to make it, let's say, the third addition of third dimension is immersive sound. And there are different technologies, let's say, to bring that immersive sound, let's say, to the audience with different techniques. We will hear today like object-based, channel-based techniques, the combination of both, yeah. But that was, in fact, let's say, how I started. And a big step, of course, when was Barco in 2011 embraced the format and was wanting to bring that format as a new cinema experience. And then I think that started to roll off. And yeah, it's amazing what this new wave created now.
Great, thank you. David?
Hello. Working? Oh, cool. We need monitors. I think probably, as everybody knows, at Dolby we were pretty much consistently working on where formats would go, where we take formats. Okay, I didn't think it was working. Okay. Trying to continue on, so we obviously 7.1 was an incremental improvement, but in our testing and in our R&D and going along with channel-based systems and going to 11.1, we did a lot of experimentation with 13.1. There's a lot of people in this room that helped us with those tests and those playing around. But we finally came to the conclusion that adding more and more and more and more channels was just getting more and more difficult, and we weren't getting, in essence, to where we really wanted to get. And so the nirvana, from our standpoint, was to be able to place a sound anywhere within the space. And then, of course, we had to back off on that nirvana in an ode to commercialism and how much that would actually cost in going along. So Atmos, we moved to basically to object-based mixing, so that basically the creative folks, mixers and sound editors, could place sounds pretty much anywhere where they wanted to, yet we would have a system that was actually implementable in going along. So it owes a lot to its rendering algorithms and going along. I would assume that later on we'll get into the specifics of you know, what it is. But I will say that if you look at all of the Dolby Laboratories formats over the years, between Dolby Stereo and then Dolby Surround for the home, Dolby SR, those were all names decided upon and agreed to by engineers. And Atmos was our first one done by marketing.
John?
Okay. It is on. Is it on?
I think so.
Okay. I should know that. MDA is a project that was started back in 2010 by SRS Labs, and the thinking that we had at the time, and that later carried on to DTS when we were acquired, was that I agree with David, our thinking was, you know, where are we going to go with audio? Audio really needs a reboot. It needs something really new, and really the only place we can really go is, you know, higher resolution PCM audio or more channels, and clearly the channels arms race, we agreed, was unsustainable. So when we decided that an object-based format would really raise the water level and foster innovation and create all kinds of new opportunities and things that audio could never do before, we set on the path of creating MDA. So let me tell you a couple things about what MDA is and isn't. MDA is not a brand, it's a file format. The 3 letters stand for multi-dimensional audio. That just seemed like a good idea at the time. And basically it is a uncompressed open PCM format. It's PCM objects. It's another flavor of PCM. Object-based audio was not something that we, you know, necessarily innovated. Object-based audio has been used in the games industry for ever and ever. The difference between something like MDA, object-based audio, and games audio is that when the objects play or are engaged is dependent on interactive gameplay. So the concept we had with MDA was, well, why don't we just make it linear? Why don't we just make a linear object-based format? So MDA, the difference between that and channel-based audio is that you mix entirely in an object-based world. In MDA, there's no limitation to the number of objects, whether they're bed objects, whether they're free-form objects. There's no limitation to the number or the length. And at the end, instead of baking all of the tracks, or what we refer to as objects, into channels, we deliver an object-based file, an MDA file, that contains all of the PCM audio essence, or those sounds. Each one has its own individual metadata attached. The metadata basically describes three things. When does the object play? How loud is it? And where is it in an XYZ coordinate? And it's pretty straight ahead. In the rendering side, particularly in any playback environment, the renderer in MDA just needs to know how many speakers it has to work with and where their location is. So each room in MDA has a unique configuration file that tells the renderer, here's how many speakers there are and their location. And effectively, speakers become pixels as opposed to channel locations. And the renderer will then render the mix as best possible to that particular configuration. So how MDA came to cinema was we at DTS got outreach from as immersive sound began to progress and become more interesting to the industry. The industry said, we really don't want to go through format wars again. What we really need is an interoperable object-based format that we could get to a place, ideally, I don't know if we'll ever get there, but we have a single deliverable that could play in any speaker environment and any number of speakers. So we were approached by exhibitors and studios, and we presented them MDA, and we set on the task with probably 10 manufacturers and partners and some studios to develop MDA for deployment for cinema, which is what we're showing over in the Quinn today. Both tools that we have developed a Pro Tools plugin that just integrates directly into Pro Tools, and we try to make the workflow as least disruptive as possible. And we now have the ability to play a MDA DCP on 3 of the most popular server companies, and with companies like USL and QSC. And so, you know, we think that this will innovate and raise the water level for everybody as a common interoperable format. And what we're seeing from the exhibition side is really a shift of power to where the exhibitors really need a value proposition. So our goal at DTS with MDA is to make immersive and object-based audio as ubiquitous as 5.1 and 7.1 is today. And, you know, because remember when 5.1 was new and there was only a few theaters? And so we think that down the road we'll be able to accomplish that goal and make this something that everybody can use.
Great. And now Bill and Kevin, just talk about, gentlemen, why don't you guys talk about what is involved in retrofitting a stage for the formats in terms of time, in terms of cost, in terms of practical issues involved?
Well, in terms of, okay. At Warner Brothers, we took a sort of an interesting tack on converting the stages because we never really took the stages out of commission. So we were running normal clients during the day and working a night shift of construction guys to hang these speakers and do all of that sort of in the background. I would say to implement either Auro or Dolby Atmos, you're probably looking at a 3-week install under those kinds of conditions after doing your homework, which involves doing all of the background tasks involved in hanging that kind of weight on the ceiling of a dubbing stage, which was structural engineering and that sort of thing. And then the build kind of separates into a couple of different categories. One is the physical aspects of getting the speakers hung and getting them wired to amplifiers if you're using conventional speakers, or if they're powered speakers, the wiring to the power supplies. And then the second half of that is developing a signal distribution system that works in the context of all the formats that you need to use on the dub stage. So what I've done is used the BSS DSP boxes, the DSS Blue, to do that in a lot of our installs. I'm not sure what you're doing, Bill, but probably the same thing. Yeah, be my guess.
Yeah. And Bill?
And I agree with everything that Kevin's saying, basically, except for the way that we went about doing it, because we have 32-foot ceilings in the room next door. We had to do 3-layer scaffolding all the way up.
Yeah, it makes it hard to run a day job when you have to put a dance floor in to do it.
We had a dance floor that was 30 feet high.
Yeah.
Well,
We
26 feet
had
high.
access to the area above, so we actually cut a hole in the deck of the building so that we could get in between the ceiling, the inner ceiling, and get in there easily.
And we took the room down for about 6 weeks, which is pretty quick, really, considering all the work that had to be done. We replaced all the fabric in the room, including the ceiling. Replaced the engine on the console because we wanted the capability of doing three-layer panning for Auro-3D. The Harrison digital engine that's next door in the Holden has the capability of being configured on a single joystick to go from the side surrounds to the upper side surrounds to the ceiling and straight across the top, whereas the previous digital engine didn't have the capability in the firmware to support that. So we had to add another $200,000 price tag on just the digital engine upgrade, and never mind the BSS Blue, all of the speaker systems and the amplifiers, and you know, the price tag was phenomenal, frankly.
So
when we
you're
were
charging,
done.
what, $5,000 an hour to mix now, I think?
But and removing the screen and replacing it with a 3D screen, and notching out the screen wall for the upper screen channels for the Auro-3D. You know, adding 46 surround speakers and associated amplifiers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Wiring, 6 weeks, it was amazing that we pulled it off, frankly.
Yeah.
But the challenges were substantial. But I believe it was all well worth it, because that's what we're in business to do, is support the formats. And I'm really pleased with the results.
Okay, so now, David and Wilfred, talk about from your first experiences and your first movies in 2012. Just give some bullet points of things that you've learned in terms of how you've adjusted your software, interfacing with mixers and the mix, and either practical issues or more meta software design issues involved. David?
Yeah, if I'd just tell one quick little story in terms of costs that were mentioned. I went into my closet at work, which is a scary thing to do because it's had 20 plus years of or more of stuff going in there. But I found, when I was looking for something else, a CD of an interview with Fred Hines by Mike Todd Jr. When Mike Todd Jr. was writing his autobiography of his father. And they were at Musso and Frank's. So you've got the, in Hollywood, so you have the waiter coming in and asking them, and so you can tell exactly what they had for lunch and the whole 9 yards. But the point is that during the course of that, Mike Todd Jr. asked Fred Hines what the Todd AO system cost in 1955. And it was $50,000. So I would assume that in today's, that's probably
8 times, probably.
probably 10 or 20
Yeah.
times easily.
Yeah.
Just
Wow.
things were expensive even then.
Okay, so now, so just about from Brave on in terms of design and changes of thought. Before you know, the initial cinema processor didn't come out with the first movies. You sort of waited.
No,
on
we
that.
yes, we really felt it was important to launch, and the playback processor for cinemas, which is the CP850, was not. it was not in a state where we felt that it was completely, it was in a state where we could have decoded, if you will, films, but a lot of the other bells and whistles and what we really wanted in it weren't completely done. So we actually, the first 150 or so theaters that were Atmos were using our dubbing equipment, which we call an RMU, and using, so that basically we were playing back in, for all intentional purposes, in double system going along. But, you know, all those kind of things are evolve on a very consistent basis. And actually this afternoon, there's a panel on workflow and in the tools themselves. So I think in terms of how those tools have evolved is probably better left for that
Okay.
panel. But what I can say is that we did learn a lot of interfacing issues that would make life easier for the interface into consoles and the interface with mixers, as compared to a number of engineers deciding that this would be a good way to work. So there's been a lot of changes, especially in the user, in the GUI, and in the renderer has also evolved.
Mm-hmm. Wilfred?
Yeah, what I experienced in, let's say, when I saw 5.1 in stereo and, let's say, how difficult it was to bring, let's say, the compatibility to the market to bring 5.1 forward, not about film only, but as well in music industry, I thought, okay, one of the key elements is, of course, you have to build up the experience and, of course, an easy way to integrate that format into the market. And first of all, it was, let's say, what is the best experience? And how can we, let's say, create immersive sound with a minimum effort? With a minimum effort, the most efficient way. And then I did a lot of experience, let's say, a lot of tests, yeah, how to build, let's say, a natural sound, in fact, a natural hemisphere, yeah. And I found a lot of new things what I didn't even realize when I was ever working in surround sound. Yeah, I remember the first time when I was just panning things in horizontal and I wanted to pan then move ups, let's say pan to height. Yeah, then it didn't work. I said, what? Why is that possible that certain sounds are, the sounds are really, you cannot position sounds in the vertical axis. Yeah, and I said, that's weird because I saw it working on my meters and I saw it going up and said. And when I turned my head like that, and then I suddenly felt them going up. I said, wow. So it took me a while to understand what, in fact, how a vertical stereo field works, and how that is completely different to our hearing than a horizontal stereo field. So in the beginning, I thought as well, let's say, putting speakers just above us, that's, of course, giving that complete immersive effect, yeah. But then I started to, I was very often disappointed. I went to a church, putting there all kind of microphones up, especially then to the ceiling. And what I found out is most of the reflections are not coming from above us. Even in a room, even outside, yeah, most of the reflections are coming from the sides or in front, but let's say typically from bottom up till about 40, 50 degrees, yeah. And what I've seen as well, that most of the sounds coming from the screen, they are on ear level. In real life as well, ear level sounds are the most important one. In fact, the most sources are original at level. So to create an immersive sound, in fact, the closer you can come to, let's say, the natural sound production, reproduction, so the more immersive it is. Yeah. So if you see on screen and you can bring sounds in a way that you are on that place, very important is, of course, to bring, let's say, those different locations into the room. And then I tried to do that with 2 layers, and I didn't achieve that. That's one of the reasons why I came to the most important one is, let's say, the existing surround layer as an ear level sound. Of course, in theaters they have to put it up to have, let's say, a spread in it. Yeah. But let's say, yeah, the smaller the room is, the more it can come down as ear level, like the ITU standard at home. Yeah. And then above that one is then, of course, let's say, the second layer. Yeah. And it is that combination around which is creating that immersive sound field, yeah. And of course, if you have pictures and flyover effects, and for certain things, it's very important, of course, to have that ceiling channel. So that's the reason why I came up, let's say, with this three-layered system to create, in fact, yeah, the most immersive, most natural, let's say, approach. And then the question was, yeah, how to bring that in a technology down, yeah. And then it was one of the ideas was, okay, to bring that in PCM. So to have an easy integration that there is not a new format needed. So I invented, let's say, the concept of a format where you can mix PCM channels and you stay in the PCM domain. So you can downmix these 3 layers into 1 layer, and that is then still PCM. And that's the same 5.1 PCM which is going out everywhere. But the decoder can reveal out of that signal exactly the original ones, yeah, in high resolution audio. So there is no any loss about the audible quality, but it's a very flexible thing because that was giving the ability to have a single file distribution in the market. So only 1 file goes in the market and can be used, of course, in the cinema or in a home cinema or in music and things like that. So that was one of the things. And then a next development was, of course, the panning. Yeah? And first I went in 2007 to EMS Neve to ask if they could just make their consoles ready with a 3-dimensional panning system. Yeah? The question was, yeah, how to do that, a 3-dimensional panning. So I thought the best is just to combine 2 panners, one doing that movement and the other one, let's say, the dirt axis. Yeah? And that's the way, in fact, that we started to run, let's say, this 3-dimensional panning. And but that was on big consoles, and more you see the, let's say, sound designers as well preparing more of, let's say, already this setup in 5.1. So the same would be then for Auro 11.1 of other Auro-3D formats. So that was one of the moments that I think, okay, we have to come to a vector-based system. So in 2009, we started, in fact, to develop our first vector-based audio, because I thought, seeing Iosono and, let's say, this kind of object-based world, I thought that will be the next step. Yeah? So after we have, let's say, the most immersive, let's say, experience, what you can perfectly achieve with channel-based systems as well, up till an amount of channels. Let's say the moment when sometimes people think more channels is better and more immersive, but you have other issues than integrating about the phase issues and things like that. So object-based, our vision is that we create first in the channel-based environment with an easy integration in the market, the most immersive experience up till about 15 channels. And after that, yeah, then it's interesting, of course, to have, let's say, more spot point sources and what you can do more with it from a creative point of view. But the question is, okay, yeah, in cinema theaters you can do that. At home cinema, it's more difficult because I think at home I'm not allowed to put more than 15 speakers in my living room.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you, Wilfred. John, so with respect to the work that you guys have been doing in developing the software, no movies have been mixed in MDA, and you've been experimenting in your offices in the West Valley. So talk about the process that you're going through now outside of dealing with the SMPTE working group, but just insofar as how are you beta, alpha, how are you testing it such that it's going to be ready when someone is actually doing a movie in it?
Well, we've actually mixed 2 short films on Dubstage.
Test films, I know, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, the goal again was to integrate this directly into a DAW workflow, because a lot, as we move forward, more and more films, they're being mixed in the box. But at the same time, how do we integrate that with large-scale consoles, because there's still films that mix that way. So I think the difference is we realized we had to create a plug-in architecture. I mean, ideally what would happen, and if we look down the road, is to integrate this entire workflow directly into the DAW. So, you know, that would be our goal, is that you know, there's a version of Pro Tools or whatever DAW you use, but Pro Tools is the big dog at the moment, which, you know, this whole workflow with immersive and object-based audio is the same as PCM channels is now, and that we have panners and file export and all the things that we need, they're just integrated. But until we get to that point, you know, we're basically integrating a plug-in that, you know, that works well, that essentially works within the architecture of a DAW, but also using things like MADI, where you can interface in and out of large-scale consoles so that we can do traditional print master workflows and mixing without too much disruption. So we will see a number of theaters coming online very soon, and we've got, you know, nothing we're going to announce right now, but we've got some films and things we're working on the work. If I can add a little context.
Sure, please.
And I think it's really important for this group and this event. One of the things that we've really looked at this very closely from is from the exhibitor and the ticket buyer's view. And the bell curve in Hollywood is very tight. And here is a whole group of people and professionals assembled, and we're talking about immersive audio and the associated cost of implementing this into stages. And, you know, exhibitors have that same challenge, if not more so. And so as we move ahead with, you know, moving immersive audio and that experience in the cinema, we have to remember that what exhibitors really, really want is they want a value proposition, because at the end of the day, exhibitors are in business to bring people into their theaters. And I don't mean this as a sobering thought, but it's just within reality context, because we all tend to get really involved about the formats and where the speakers go and everything else. And at the end of the day, I've spent a lot of time with exhibitors and chains, and they've been testing all sorts of things as to what can we do to bring people into theaters. And you don't have to do much prediction, you just have to look at what their behavior is. So I'll point out, if you Google Wall Street Journal 2-3 weeks ago, you'll find an article, when you talk about premium theaters, you'll find an article about perhaps the largest chain in North America, 5,000 screens, has just announced that they're investing $600 million into 1,800 screens to seats. So when I talk to exhibitors and they talk about what's working about bringing people in, it's comfy leather motorized recliner seats, it's booze, it's food, and they can upcharge for that, and they're getting the upcharge for that. So when we go in with a very, very high cost proposition with immersive audio, I guess it's one of the things I think we all have to be very, very cognizant of, is that at the end of the day, if we cannot create an affordable, scalable, immersive cinema experience that goes to many different levels, they're just not going to do it. They're going to buy chairs, and that's what they're already doing. You go down to Marina Del Rey to the AMC, you know, they've got ArcLight has 21 and over shows, and the exhibitors have been very clear about what's working for them. So as we move forward on this and we look at the costs associated, my only statement here is it's something that we're very cognizant of, is trying to make this experience integrated to as many rooms as possible.
Thank you. So this is the question I was about to ask at the beginning. Let's go back to the future. Let's jump a year in the future, and let's say that the Simply Working Group. Now, John, correct my verbiage here. The 25 CSS, I think it's kind of working group, they are looking at MDA as a possible open format.
Well, they've been tasked to define an object-based bit stream.
Okay, but I want to be really specific about the words here. Is in a sense MDA being proposed as an open format standard, or as
we have submitted? Yes, we have submitted MDA as a complete solution, the spec, and a proposal for cinema for MDA to fulfill the needs of what that working group has been tasked to do.
Okay, so we've already seen, and I don't know if those of you saw the previous panel, that taking metadata from Auro to Atmos and Atmos to Auro works. And so that, even though the theater layout is very different, but I'm just sort of addressing here is if we go 2 years in the future or 1 year in the future, and MDA is accepted as such, and this goes to, I think primarily to Wilfred and David, is how would that change how Dolby and Auro technologies works, both in terms of the licensing of movies and the playback of movies? How would that affect your business insofar as the way films are being mixed and the way they're shown in your theaters? David?
To be blunt, I don't think it would change it very much at all. In other words, what the SMPTE group is working on is a method of transmission. Okay, so the renderer, what's in the theater, and the way that renderer is used is still, ours and Wilford's and MDA and whoever else wants to come down the line. So, in essence, what you could say is our secret sauce is intact, Wilford's secret sauce is intact, everybody's secret sauce is intact, and the creative community still gets those formats and knows what they will get when they use those formats.
Mhm.
Okay, so.
Well, but if someone mixes in Auro, or actually let's specifically say MDA, let's say if that's the open standard, and they go into, in your case, a theater which has the CP850, which has your cinema processor. So if someone has mixed in that format, and then a DCP has that object-based XML stream, and they hit play on the DCP, what's going to happen?
Well, can I jump in and
If you wish.
try to help these guys a little bit?
If you wish.
So to be
I
clear,
can answer it.
Okay,
believe
okay,
me.
okay,
So
okay.
what 25 CSS has been tasked to do is create, an interoperable bitstream format. Let's say a year or two from now, let's say that is established and there is an interoperable format in bitstream. That does not, I want to be clear, MDA doesn't replace anything that's there. That doesn't mean that there cannot be embellishments. It does not mean there cannot be proprietary formats. That will be for the market to decide. So if the value proposition from Dolby or Auro is something that exhibitors and ticket buyers want, it doesn't, because there's an interoperable format, it doesn't mean all that goes away. It just means there's an interoperable format that everybody can work from.
Well, one second, Wilford. But David, so in other words, would it play as an immersive? Will the 850 then be modified such that if you have an MDA DCP stream as opposed to an Atmos, that it will play? Because you guys have said you're going to, join
Right.
with everybody.
Exactly. We would have to implement whatever that is, be it MDA or PDQ or
Right.
RFP or
Right.
whatever other three-letter acronym we decide to put to it.
Right.
Our playback processors would need to have upgrades
Okay.
with which to handle it, which we're involved with that, and if that comes to fruition, we will do that.
Okay, and then flipping it around, if someone mixes in Atmos and they take it to a theater with let's just say a QSC processor that is MDA or is SMPTE compliant, will an Atmos mix still only play in an Atmos theater?
No. Theoretically, at that point, it would take the metadata from whatever renderer is in that other thing and render it using that metadata.
Right.
Anything that was proprietary to us, so it would render it in its basic configuration.
So, but you would still only have one package that's sent to theaters?
Yes, theoretically. Yeah.
Okay. Wilford? Okay, Kevin. I'm sorry, Kev.
I just wanted to add to your scenario here, because we're talking in the future. So right now, in our digital asset universe, we still don't have big enough pipes to electronically send these movies to your local movie theater. They ship hard drives right now. That's still a universe of we would like to have a single format that does the whole thing. And that gives value to what John's proposing. But in the future, if we have enough bandwidth to directly electronically deliver them, if you look at our past, you would probably say that it won't matter what format it's in, because we'll master in every format available and send that format to the theater, because now we don't have any shipping costs. We've got an easy way to electronically drop the asset there. That's my view of the future.
Okay, Wilfred?
I think, so what I think is very important, and that's what we all try to do when we are sitting behind the mixing console and a director is there, what he tries to have is the preservation of the creative intent. So I think, let's say, where we try to mix, and we mix it, of people create a mix in Atmos or an Auro-3D, you try to make it in such a way that it translates very well. Yeah. And I think that's the point now. I agree with what David said. In fact, that new standard is not going to define, let's say, that difference in experience. It's more about how can we get one delivery format that we are not going up, let's say, with doubling all the inventory for the distribution, which will be solved one day, let's say, this whole pipelines are giving, let's say, more bandwidth and having that direct distribution, yeah. So that's one point. Now, from a technical point of view, there is, of course, a very important thing, how to create then, let's say, in one workflow, all this stuff together, yeah. That's what what I think our tools, the Auro-3D Creative Tool Suite does, yeah. So we implemented already the MDA, let's say, object-based technology. We can do the same, let's say, with Dolby, if Dolby gives the secret sauce to implement it in our tools, yeah. But let's say that's, I think, the way, and there are differences between those both formats, which are much bigger than people would believe. It is an object-based approach, or two different approaches. You have, let's say, we call it, let's say, the shoebox model, yeah, because if you pan, yeah, and you pan, let's say, like in a theater, you pan pairways in this kind of model, or like MDA is going, let's say, from a hemispheric point of view, like the speakers are not installed, yeah, but let's say that's a better approach perhaps for headphones, the other more for rooms. So there's a lot of discussion at this moment. What is now the best approach? Because there are like two different kind of technologies, yeah, and that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges to come, let's say, to a common agreement to understand what's now the best. Because they are like two different markets and they are like two different technologies, and in fact they're not 100% compatible.
Okay, great.
There was one more question about license fee you said, and I
didn't say license fee.
Okay.
No, so let's go ahead and open. Tom, you want to open up for questions now? Yeah, let's do that. We can always jump back to the audience. Jump back to the panel.
Stand up there since you're first.
If you're using essentially a universal format that can reproduce both Auro and Barco, and hypothetically, this is a future hypothetical question.
It's not a universal format.
Or not a universal format, but a format that can keep the artist's intention and allow it to be reproduced in both setups, essentially. What does that mix still stay a Barco branded mix or an Atmos branded mix at that point? Like, is it the defined by, I guess, the setup of the creator, or would it be a Barco mix by the fact that it is now being reproduced and converted?
Well, it's always defined.
You know?
The thing is that regardless of format, the mixer and the creator are always in control of it. That's a given.
Okay, and I guess that relates to, I guess, my second question with the gentleman in the black. You had brought up the Wall Street Journal article that you found about the bottom line and about the investment of theaters and how they are putting in comfy seats before they're worried about immersive sound. I personally, as a theater goer, have a really hard time finding where I can go to see an Atmos mix because of the different branding that licensing is embedded under. Do you think that is affecting the investment and the willingness of theaters to invest in that technology, because it's not something that's obvious. It's under different brands. It's not like it says Atmos at this theater per se.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, just as someone who's observed that article as well. Like, I find it's a little confusing, as a theater, as a ticket.
What we're seeing is a shift in my perspective. We're seeing a shift where the kind of the power base of cinemas is shifting to exhibitors. They're starting to dictate terms of what they're going to do. And one of the things that we're seeing over recent years is that exhibitors want to exploit their own brand. They're not necessarily interested in some ubiquitous or global brand. They're like, well, no, I want you to come to my theater, not their theater, and I have super turbo theater, or, you know, these guys have extreme awesome, you know, theaters, and, you know, and they're really serious about this. They really want to differentiate themselves. So they're more interested in exploiting their branding than they are, you know, and everything else is sort of a subset of that. So, you know, again, much as we would love them to all, you know, say on the marquee, sound format featuring this movie, you know, at the end of the day, they've got to bring people in. And the stuff that they're doing is what is working to bring them in. So I don't see a change in them exploiting their individual brands. I actually think we'll see more of that.
Right, and I think you'll see branding becoming more of a partnership. In other words, XDC with Atmos, or Cinemark has a number of Auro, for example. But if you look at how many theaters, I think in the number of films that have been done, I don't know the Auro numbers right off the top of my head, but ours, we're basically in 700 theaters right now, which is, you know, I think if you add in the Auro numbers on top of that, that's a pretty substantial amount, and they are the highest grossing theaters in the world. So one of the things in exhibition is that you make 90% of your money in 10% of the theaters. So
Yeah.
that
I
still
would say
drives a lot
also
of the
to
business.
that the creative community, we, the users of these formats, also feel that there's like very little marketing being done, and there's a lot of frustration on our part because we put a lot of work into these movies, and we're very proud about how they come out, how they sound, and then we talk to, you know, the people we know that go to the movies, and they're trying to find a theater that has Auro or that has Dolby Atmos, and they want to talk about it, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot of information out there right
Yeah.
now.
Yes, next
Still
one.
early days.
Over here? Where's
Quick
it?
question.
Yes, sir.
John or anyone, is there a sense of how far we are away from the SMPTE standard?
I'm not going to go there.
Me neither.
David? Nobody. Okay,
wouldn't
good.
touch
Next
that one
question.
with a-
That was a good.
I
40
Larry,
foot pole.
I used to get the SMPTE standards sent to me at Warner Brothers, and it was almost humorous how far behind they actually published. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, SMPTE, for those of you who don't know, is a due process organization, which means that when things are going in for standardization or recommended practices, you have to have 100% agreement. And if you don't, it just continues going on and on and on. So
It brings new
can
meaning
take
to
some
political
time.
correctness. Yeah.
So as all the digital tape formats were coming out, I was getting the standards for C format video.
Next.
Yeah, so getting back to what you guys were saying about the exhibitor branded formats, is there a collaboration that you guys are doing with the exhibitors to meet those formats, or are they kind of making it up on their own? And how do you transfer what we're doing in your formats to what they're having in their rooms? Is there a lot of variation in what they're doing, or is it?
Well, remember, they're trying to differentiate themselves. They're including, you know, in premium rooms, they're including these formats, picture and sound, right? They're big screen, you know, big sound, whatever the sound format is. But I think the exhibitors, I don't know, I wouldn't characterize it as that they're necessarily just making it up as they're going along. They're saying, I want to make my chain the place where people want to go, and I want to exploit my brand, and that includes all these other things.
From a practical standpoint, as a mixer, if I mix in Dolby Atmos, how am I going to know what it's going to sound like at an AMC, I guess is the question.
You will. The spec doesn't change.
Yeah, it includes Dolby Atmos. It includes sometimes things, you know, it includes Auro. It includes things like ETX. I mean, there's a number of things that are out there that they include in all this.
And you're going to go listen to it.
Yeah. Tom?
Do we have one next door? Did you have
One over there?
next door, sir?
Oh, someone next to you?
I thought he had one.
No? Okay.
Anybody else?
Questions?
Larry, do you have one to wrap up?
Well, yeah, I just want a quick one here. When you're doing just the deliverables on a object-based mix are pretty crazy, because you no longer have like a simple 3 5.1 stems at a 5.1 print master and go home. So David, I mean, and Bill and Kevin also, how are things sussing out? Because I mean, Auro is actually very elegant and simple, because you can have 11.1 that folds down, and it's sort of, because it's channel based right now, it's very straightforward. But David, if you give someone an M&E for an Atmos mix, it could be dozens of channels wide, right? And so how are people managing that? I mean, it seems like it's a nightmare of sorts.
I don't think so. I mean, it's file-based, so.
Yeah, I mean, Dolby's tool set is developing for that as we speak, and they have a function where you can create down mixes that are rendered in channel base.
But those are just the beds.
No, it's wider than that, and it's developing to a point where it will ultimately become a matrix that can be controlled by the end user.
I would think maybe I'm confused. I'm thinking that
You're talking about
anything.
if you wanted to make a standard M&E, let's
Right.
say a 5.1 channel M&E,
Right.
you can render that out of the tool set.
Yeah, you can render the.
I'm
you can
referring to
render the
if they're going to be
objects
dubbing.
down.
I mean, I haven't been clear. If they're going to make an Auro, or an Atmos print master in a dub version, then you have to send them all the objects.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
The MDA tools also, it not only export the MDA object-based file, but you can choose any of the configurations that I talked about, the unique configurations, and that can go stereo 5171. And at any point in the tool, you can simply also say export it as channels.
Right.
So you could make pre-dubs, you could do all of the normal things you do now. So you not only in the tool export the object-based file,
Right.
but you can choose any number of channel outputs and just print it out as channels.
But don't we think that forever and ever, because we've had 9 years of DCPs, that we will always, regardless of what happens with immersive audio, we'll always have to have a standard PCM print master there, in addition to immersive format XYZ? I mean, because we can never expect that 100%, not 99% of all digital cinema theaters would go to this immersive format. So even if it does down mix on the fly, so to speak, to a 5.1, we can't assume 100% of theaters will, right?
No, you're talking about for distribution out into the theaters.
Distribution on the DCP.
Yeah, I think on the DCP, you will always have a 5.1
Right,
of some form,
right,
or somehow. either.
right.
Because,
and we
because
have
you
two
can't
hats.
count, there's plenty of ways that you could render 5.1 from the systems.
Right.
But you can't count on the fact that those theaters are going to have that kind of a process.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
5.1 stays on there
Right,
as the de facto standard for theaters that haven't done anything.
right.
And from a facility standpoint, we like doing versions.
Oh, I understand.
Versions are good.
I
Versions are
understand,
very
Kev.
good.
Any more questions, Tom? Okay, everybody. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight, and everybody here, thank you.